Welcome to Sewing Anastasia, and today we're going to create a makeup brush carrier. Because I am so tired of my makeup brushes on the very bottom of my makeup bag, and I'm always searching through it, trying to find the one I need, and I can't. So, today's the day we're gonna make a makeup brush carrier. I also want to point out that I'm going to be using a clear vinyl to create this, so that way it's super easy to clean. You don't have to worry about throwing it in a washing machine all the time because it's covered in makeup. You can literally just take a cloth, wipe it off because it's clear vinyl. So what supplies do you need to create this? Great question. First of all, you need your makeup brushes because we're going to be making it to the exact specifications of your makeup brushes. And you're going to need your snips and your handy dandy rotary cutter. And you're going to need some bias binding. You're probably going to need about 2 to 3 yards of bias binding. And lastly, you're going to need your clear vinyl. You're going to need about a ½ yard of your clear vinyl. I chose purple. You could do clear, pink, orange, yellow, do whatever you like. Most importantly, you're going to need a pattern. If you'd like to use the pattern that I've perfected, you can get it through Patreon the month of December. All you need to do is subscribe to Patreon and I will email it over to you. The first thing we're gonna do is cut out our pattern. So grab your pattern pieces and let's lay it out on the vinyl. The first piece I'm gonna cut out is the U shape. And you only need to cut out one of each of the pattern pieces, so you're gonna end up with 3 pieces of vinyl. So let's go ahead and cut out our vinyl. You're going to cut vinyl the same way that you cut fabric. I'm gonna go around the edges. Make sure your edges are nice and crisp. It does want to move on you a little bit if you're using a little piece, so make sure it's down nice and flat. Woohoo! One done. Kind of looks like a sled or a sea snake or something. I don't know. It's rectangle time! So let's go ahead and cut out those 2 rectangles that we have. One rectangle done. Now we're gonna move over to the next one. Let's go ahead and put our weight on it. Looks good. Also, you want to know that there is not really a grain line to this clear vinyl. So if you were off grain placing it on here, wouldn't really matter too much. Okay, now we are done with rectangle 2. And now we have 2 different sized rectangles. It's kind of like playing Tetris. Now you should have your U-shaped pattern piece, and then you should also have the 2 rectangles, the small and the big one. Now, let's go over to the sewing machine and sew this up. Before we even start sewing, we need to make sure that our machine is set up properly. So on this particular machine, it wants you to use the H foot, which is the Teflon foot. If you don't have a Teflon foot, no problem. Your machine should also come with little Teflon strips that you can put on the back of any foot. So I am using the A foot with the Teflon strips on the bottom of it. We're gonna use the Teflon foot or these strips so that way your metal foot does not stick to the vinyl. You also wanna go over to your sewing advisor and make sure you're using the vinyl leather setting. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is grab your large rectangle. We're going to put bias binding on one of the long edges, and if you don't know how to put on bias binding, make sure you check out my video on how to put on bias binding. So let's get sewing. Okay, so grab your bias binding and flip it open so that way you can see that crease, because we're going to sew right into that crease. And you want to make sure that your cotton is lined up right with the edge of your vinyl. Okay, so our first step is done. You have half of the bias binding sewn down. So now we want to take it and we're going to flip it over the edge and we're going to sew down the other side of the bias binding. So now what you want to do is go ahead, fold it over. Let's put it under the machine and go on your way. Now that you've finished your small rectangle, go ahead and place it on your U shape. because we are going to sew in our makeup brushes. So make sure it's lined up perfectly straight. Great thing about vinyl is that it kind of sticks to itself, so you don't need pins. So what we're going to do first is do a stitch right on the end. So the shape with the U, we're gonna sew right on down. I'm going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch. Perfect. So this was the start of where we're going to start making the casing for our brushes. Now go ahead and grab all your makeup brushes because we're going to insert them in the plastic and sew a line, and then insert one and sew a line. Because all my brushes are different sizes, I don't want to go ahead and make generic little slots for them because there's a potential that they're just gonna shake around and move around, and I don't want that. So decide what order you want them in, and then go ahead and put your first brush in. So you can see how we already have the line started over here, which is holding it in, and now we're going to go ahead and put that in there and go back to our machine. Okay, we have 1 done and 14 more to go. So let's get sewing. Woohoo! We finished, kind of. Check it out. We've got all of our makeup brushes in this, and it looks super rad. I kind of love it. But we are not done. So go ahead and trim all of your threads. You're literally gonna have like 45 threads everywhere. And notice mine ended up a little uneven, no big deal. Great news is that it fits all of our brushes. So I'm gonna go ahead and just even this out and cut off this extra. Perfect. Now we are all even. Next, you're gonna take 2 12-inch pieces of bias tape, and you're just gonna fold it and sew it together. This is gonna be the ties on the end of our bag that keep it together from unrolling. Now we have 2 ties, so we are gonna go ahead and just baste these onto our bag. We're gonna go ahead and baste it or sew it down in the very middle of this U shape, and we're doing it on the outside of the case here. There we go, we got some ties. Now we're gonna take the big rectangle, which is the makeup brush protector, and we're gonna go ahead and place it on top and make sure you line it up. Really important, make sure this edge is not all the way over here because we're gonna bias bind around the edge and we don't wanna get that caught in there, otherwise you'll never be able to get it up. So go ahead and make sure this is laid down perfectly. Okay, so the first edge we're gonna do is a short edge here because the rest of it is one sewing in a U shape with the bias binding. So first we're gonna do the short edge with the bias binding here, and then we're gonna go ahead and do the U shape. And then it's done. Okay, and then we want to go ahead and flip it around and finish the bias. Sometimes I like to go ahead and cut the plastic down a little shorter so that way it's easier to wrap the bias binding around it. Perfect, way better. Woohoo! Got that edge down. Okay, so you can go ahead and trim any extra that you see hanging on the edge. Any of your threads, go ahead, clip those off. So now we're gonna go ahead, take your bias binding, and we're gonna sew it around the U shape that's left. So this is our last step of the project, and we're done. Make sure you leave some extra off the end because we're gonna need to fold that under. Okay, so we are halfway there with the bias binding. Now go ahead, if you need to, cut off half of that vinyl that's there and fold over your bias binding, and let's finish. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and fold over the bias binding and just be really careful with the curves that it doesn't like pucker on you or do anything funky. Let's start sewing. We are looking so good. I'm ready to do my makeup, but make sure we turn under these little fishy ends here. So we're gonna go ahead and just flip them under once, or if it's not too bulky for your machine, you can go ahead and flip it under twice. So you're gonna take it, I'm gonna flip mine over once. This is bias binding, so you don't have to worry about it fraying because it's cut on the bias. Ooh, whoa, we did it. Now go ahead and do that to the other side as well. We did it! We finished our makeup brush carrier. I am in love with this. I think it's so cool. So now all you need to do is roll it up and tie it in a bow. Let's do it. So I'm gonna start at the end and just carefully roll it up. You don't need to make it super tight. And take the ends that we made that are bias bound and tie it in a bow. And now this fits perfectly either in your makeup bag without getting makeup all over your bag, or throw it in your purse. It's great to travel with and makes a really great holiday gift idea. Thank you so much for watching Sew Anastasia today. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. I would absolutely love to see your projects, so hashtag Sew Anastasia, S-E-W Anastasia, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also do Anastasia Chatska because, well, check out my life in the boutique and my life as a fashion designer. If you'd like this pattern, all you need to do is subscribe to me on Patreon this month and we will email the pattern to you. But after that, you can get it on my website, sewanastasia.com. If you didn't know, I have a boutique in Chicago. So next time you're in Chicago, make sure you stop on by and check out my new collections. Details below. Thanks so much for watching today. Bye!